The following is a GoPowerCat.com production.
It is 45 degrees in Morgantown, 71 in Fort Worth, 62 in Manhattan, Kansas, and today in Studio 73, it is 72 degrees here in Frisco, Texas. This is the Big Insiders.
Welcome to the Big Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Big 12 Insiders. We have got Jamie Plunkett covering TCU, Mike Casaza with West Virginia. What is going on, fellas? How you guys doing?
I'm awesome. Glad to be back. How are we doing?
Doing great, Brian. Doing great. Good to see you, Mike.
We are doing all right, man. Doing all right. So, usually we start the show and we talk a little bit about what's currently going on in college hoops. But today I'm going to switch it up a little bit because we got the football schedules came out. You know, the 2024 football schedules came out. So I kind of wanted to start off and get your all's opinion. I'll start with you, Mike. What are you seeing as far as any pitfalls, anything that looks maybe tricky, looks good? Do you dislike about West Virginia's upcoming football schedule?
You know, for a team that's like a supposed contender, I think it's fair to say I'm still wrapping my head around that after the last couple of years. But I think they're a contender, right? Two things stand out. One, they play 11 Power 5 schools, and I think if they had the means to do that, they would probably not be playing 11 Power 5 schools. But they open up with Penn State, and then they play at Pitt, and then they have the 9 Big 12 games. So that's something that people typically avoid. And for whatever reason, they got into this habit a couple of years ago. They're breaking it in the future. They're not doing that. They're going FCS Group of 5 Power 5. So that's one. It's a rarity. It's not something that you need to be doing now. And it was before when you were trying to get into the conversation. You had to have that extra data point. And all of a sudden, they have the conference championship games, and that kind of looks silly to have all these Power 5s. And now the playoffs even bigger. So you don't have to have all that data, but That's one thing that stands out. Second one is for a supposed contender that you'd like to have alive at the end of the season. Their schedule is front loaded. They play really top half, top third teams in the Big 12 early on. And that may be like a litmus test for the team to see how good they are. Perhaps they get through that wall, over that mountain, whatever cliche you want to use. They might be able to take it easy and coast in and get a lot better. And with some substance in the rearview mirror, develop some style toward the finish line. And if they play their cards right and everything breaks out, you know, that's the type of momentum where you win, and you win with some ease or some separation. And all of a sudden you look pretty good for a spot in that top 12, which, again, I can't believe I'm saying this right now. It seems so far gone from this time last year, but that's where they are.
No, they definitely are. That was one of the topics we talked about yesterday when we were talking about, you know, any surprise teams or any teams out there that we think could be a contender. West Virginia's name got brought up, and I think for good reason. I get it. Like from last year to this year, it is a complete 180. I mean, literally a 180. But you know what? Neil Brown, man, I'm telling you, he figured it out. Whatever he did, he figured it out. I do love your point, though, Mike, as far as talking about the 11 Power 5 schools, especially with the playoff the way that it is. I mean, they're basically punishing you now. Look at Florida State. Not that they did that, but Florida State went undefeated, got left out. They got left out. So they're not rewarding you for beating everybody now. That it doesn't make sense for you to play those teams. So I get it. They did it this year, but they're getting out of it in the future, and rightly so, because it just doesn't pay to do that. If that's the right wording or not, it doesn't pay to do that.
I think but the devil's advocate here is that should they lose to Penn State or Pitt, one of the two, not both.
Right.
Should they lose? Let's say they lose to Penn State, and then they go 8-1 in the Big 12, and 7-2, whatever. They get into the championship game. They win the championship game. That's an auto spot for
absolutely
the conference champion. So theoretically, you can go 0-3 in your non-conference, and because the field is bigger and you're a champion of one of the top conferences, granted, you got to be highly ranked in that top. All the parameters exist still, but some of the non-conference can do some damage to you, and you've still taken care of business in the conference, and you win your championship. Table's set for you too. So I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how schools do this too. I think 11 is too big of a bite. I wonder if teams will do that. I think not. I wonder if teams will not play Power 5s. And then remember those neutral site games that used to be like sliced bread, like multi-million-dollar income days? They're not as popular anymore. And I don't know if it's because of the Power Five thing. Maybe it's a post-pandemic commercial sponsorship thing. I don't know, but they used to be like preseason bowl games. You just don't see them in the same quantity anymore. And I don't know if that's a permanent thing, if that's temporary, or even if the corporations or the teams want to bring them back.
Yeah, I used to love those games. Used to love seeing them at the neutral sites, all that good stuff. But I think you're right. I mean, maybe it's post-COVID or not, but the one thing is people aren't going to the games. That's the one thing, is that you're not seeing. You know, it used to be sold out. I mean, they'd have them at the Meadowlands or wherever they had them. They would be packed, and that is not the case anymore. I mean, if it's a 65, 70,000 seat stadium, you might get 45, and to do that on opening weekend at 45, you can't do that. It doesn't make sense to do that. Teams are losing revenue. They'd rather play somebody else at home and get all that revenue money. So, Jamie, what's going on, my man? Appreciate you coming back to us. TCU schedule, taking a look at it from the outside in. I guess the same topic, same question. Any pitfalls, anything that stands out or jumps out at you just off of, I know it's been a couple of days, that you see immediately?
You know, similar to Mike, you know, there are 11 Power 5 schools on this schedule for TCU. It's more coincidence than by plan because of SMU moving to the ACC. But I think two of the things that stand out to me the most beyond the number of Power 5 teams are the fact that TCU only has 6 home games this year and only one non-conference home game, and it's Long Island. That's something that I don't think TCU likes. It's part of the reason that they're not going to move forward with the SMU game beyond 2025. And so that they can have a little bit more control over home game totals year over year, where they're going to be able to get some programs in that are going to come in and do some one and dones, maybe some 2-for-1s, rather than alternating back and forth like they have been with SMU. So one of the last times, probably the last time, TCU will travel to SMU for quite some time. So that's on the schedule for this year. The other thing that really stands out is where the bye weeks fall for TCU this year. They fall before a road trip to Utah and before a home game late in the season against Arizona. And so you have an extra week of preparation for a team that you're not used to playing, and two teams that are coming into the conference as, you know, nationally perceived frontrunners. And so you have two of the stronger incoming teams that you have an extra week to prepare for with those bye weeks, which I think breaks really favorably for TCU.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't even remember. I mean, I'll just be honest. I don't remember the last time in college where there were 2 bye weeks in a season. I just don't remember that being a thing. I mean, and I go all the way back to when I played. I don't remember that being a thing at all. I mean, heck, it wasn't that long ago. Now, I guess technically 25, 30 years ago, that's a long time. But you didn't even get bye weeks. You know, they started putting those in there. So to have 2 in a season, I'm going to see how the landscape works out. I know it seems like the season's starting maybe a little earlier this year and then going on. But I like the schedule for everybody. I like the Big 12. I like how they're doing it. I think it's going to be conducive. And here's what we talked about yesterday, the last couple of days, actually, fellas, is we kind of brought this up, and I want to get your all's opinion on this. The Big 12 conference as a whole, we are losing 2 national brands, obviously, in OU and Texas. I mean, is what it is. Is it more important, do you guys believe, to have maybe 2 or 3 teams take off and become the number one or become more of a national brand, to have them be more of a national brand? Or do you think, you know, conference solidarity is that, you know what, every 3 or 4 years, we're going to have somebody different that comes up and challenges? Do you think it's strength in numbers, or do you think we have to have somebody take the lead as far as the lead dog? And I'll just start with you, Jamie.
You know, I think it's a really interesting question that you pose, because there are probably 5 or 6 fan bases in the Big 12 right now who think that with the absence of Oklahoma, they have the opportunity to be the top dog. I think, you know, West Virginia's thinking that right now after last year. Kansas State, obviously, with their pedigree and record. TCU, Arizona, Utah. I would say Oklahoma State's probably in that conversation as well. And we're going to find out really quickly who establishes themselves as a front runner. And, you know, I don't know that there's necessarily going to be a blue blood style program that rises to the top of the conference like we've seen in years past, simply because we're about to witness parity like we've never seen in the Big 12 before.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really challenging, I think, for teams to overcome some of that parity, because similar to what we were seeing in basketball this year, anybody will be able to beat anybody on any given Saturday, and that's going to keep the playing field pretty level. But, I think that there's a lot of hope for a handful, probably 50%, if not more, of the fan bases in the conference right now, looking ahead to what's to come in 2024 and beyond. And that gets me really hyped up. Mike, you're talking about West Virginia playing Pitt. I'm absolutely watching that game, and I'm, gonna chant Sweet Caroline stuff all the whole way through. And same for watching you guys play Penn State. I'm gonna be really glued to the TV when Oklahoma State and Texas Tech play. Right, I think that the parity across the conference is generally going to be very good, because it's going to attract more attention when all of the teams have a chance to win on Saturday.
Yeah, it's kind of a Rorschach test for an ink blot test. Like, it's there. What do you want to see? And so, for example, like, let's just borrow from basketball. Basketball has a blue blood, and Kansas is as good as it gets when it comes to the luxuries and accessories for a program. And for a long, long time, won the conference every year, and I think is kind of revered or hated as like the beloved son of the of the conference, right? But look at what's happened the past several years. Some other teams have won it. Other teams have won national championship or made the Final Four, the Elite Eight, and then just what you have now is an absolute like not round robin anymore, but like it used to be, 2 rounds against every team. Like, a lot of crazy stuff would happen, and now it's even more widespread with more teams in there. It's going to continue to, I think, evolve in a way that's much more balanced, and you're going to see some odd outliers because you don't have to play everybody twice. So ducking somebody and getting them just once, maybe on your home floor, you can make a run at the conference that no one saw coming. Something similar is going to happen in football. And I think that's a healthy thing. You might have a name, but also you're going to have this parity that we're talking about that allows other people into the party. The problem, though, is with developing that name. One, it takes, a generation to have a blue blood, right?
At least.
And how are you doing that now? For multiple reasons. One, you're not going to have your roster for many years in a row. And you're not going to rely on high school recruiting over and over and over. So that cycle is going to spin much faster and be much shorter. You're not going to have people who grow up dreaming of playing at their state school because they didn't see a lot of other people do it, right? You're not going to know these players as well as you did for 3 and 4 and 5 years before. You're going to know a guy for 1 year, maybe 2, because the transfer portal, number one. Number two, the longevity on coaches, as we've seen again with Jeff Hafley from Boston College. They're not going to stick around long enough to turn a program into a blue blood. They're not going to come in and say, I have this nice program, let me make it premier. It takes too much time and too much effort and too much frustration now to do that. So I think it's a nice goal to speak of. I think it's a crazy one to pursue because it's not realistic here. So how do you make this as roundabout and competitive as you can? And I wonder if that's not something that the administrative offices and the C-suite in the Big 12 is trying to figure out. How can you make this inviting and a party for everybody as opposed to just 1 or 2 teams? Now, the reality is that like everybody loves this now without Texas and Oklahoma in football. And I promise you, in the administration and the C-suite office at Mountaineer Field, they gave Neil Brown more time because they said, can we get this to the starting line in 2024 and see a Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma? They had not beaten Oklahoma in the Big 12 until last season, 2022. They had okay success against Texas. Nothing wrong with that. They're out of the way now. And if you look at their schedule, in a normal year, they would go to Texas and have Oklahoma at home. They swapped that out with a game at Arizona and at home against UCF. What would you rather have?
Yeah.
Definitely Arizona and UCF, right? I mean, who knows what Arizona is going to be, and UCF is not ready yet to have a multiple season run in the Power 5. So that's the reality right now, and that makes West Virginia a lot more optimistic than they would have been 2, 3, 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's the thing. I take the vantage point of, I think strength is in numbers. I think just what you said, Mike, I think it takes way too long to try to build a blue blood. And let's just face it, blue bloods are already established. As a national or as a conference on a national basis, I just think we have to look at it as, hey, we are the conference. The conference as a whole is the name, not just individual teams. You can do that in basketball, especially with Arizona coming in next year. That's something different. But in football, I just think we need to take advantage of what we can take advantage of. We're the brand. The Big 12 is the brand. Every year, it's going to be parity. You're going to want to watch because anybody can win on any Saturday. And that's where the difference is, where in other conferences, and we've talked about it, they're top heavy. SEC top heavy. Big 10, while it'll get more competitive with a couple other teams coming in, it's still top heavy. Everybody can't win those conferences every year, and we know that. But in the Big 12, it's different. Anybody can pop up. You'll have a Baylor pop up, a West Virginia, TCU, K-State, Oklahoma State. These teams are going to pop up every single year, and I think that just makes the conference as a whole, Jamie. I just believe that makes it stronger to try to do that because, like you said, Mike, trying to build a blue blood out of a football program, I mean, that's just not realistic. It's just not a realistic thing to, even in basketball, it's not realistic. I mean, look, UConn, people are saying that UConn can't be a blue blood. They won 5 titles in 25 years, and people are still pushing back on that. So it's like, okay, well, what else do you have to do? In football, it would be even worse. I don't think it's attainable. I just think the strength is in the numbers to make the conference be what it's going to be nationally.
And I think if the approach is going to be that, Brien, then there has to be a show of strength on a national stage as well for the Big 12. They have to go into some of these non-conference games, especially against the SEC and Big Ten, and they have to win those football games.
Yes.
You make it to the playoff, you have to win those football games, you know?
Correct.
And so I think changing the perspective from a national standpoint is going to take a lot of winning out of conference when you don't have a blue blood that's going to be your representative year in and year out on the national stage. It's something that I think the Big 12 has done a decent job of over the course of the past several years. Obviously, TCU's college football playoff win against Michigan was a big one. Kansas State, the last few years in the postseason, you know, winning the Pop-Tart Bowl, the most watched non-playoff bowl this year, and eating the mascot and all the craziness that happened with that. I think there have been strides in that direction that will need to continue on a consistent basis, both in the early season non-conference and in postseason play to help the national brand of the conference.
It's kind of a unique situation for the Big 12. Like at a good time here too, because as you're saying, if you think of conferences, you more or less think of who. It's a name program or a name coach. Like, you know, it's Alabama, it's Michigan, Ohio State, it's Alabama, LSU, Georgia. Big 12 doesn't have that, but like more and more, this is kind of nerdy marketing stuff, but like your brand is not what you tell people you are. You can have all the slogans and mottos that you want, but your brand is what people think of you.
Absolutely.
And if people think you are Georgia and Alabama, that could be a positive or that could be to your detriment. You know, it's the same old, or wow, it's the 2 biggest programs in the country. Similar with the Big Ten, like, wow, it's Oklahoma, it's Ohio State and Michigan again. Pac-12 is a little bit more exciting, or at least interesting now, because you got all those West Coast schools coming. So now that's a new identity for the Big Ten, I should say. What is the Big 12 right now? It's not who. And it's this wide open, you know, this flyover country that anybody could take. So I think if they can find a way to develop this great unknown as to, you know, who and what, that kind of takes care of itself. So this is like a funky kind of a league that changes the champion every couple of years and, you know, doesn't go 0-1 in the playoff every year.
Yeah.
It's into the Final Four, the championship game. Maybe he wins a title in the next couple of years. Who knows? That'll go a long way toward taking care of the who and the what. But like the identity of the league right now is a big question mark. And it's up to the teams and the coaches and the athletic departments to take care of that and just turn that into an exclamation point. This is going to work. We just got to figure out who and what is going to make it happen.
Absolutely. Both of you guys are right. I think we got to win. I think it's up to us as a conference as a whole to make the national perception be whatever we're going to make it out to be. We got to go win these games. We've got to, somebody's got to take charge, or we as a whole have to take charge. Like I said, we just don't have that name recognition that other places do. We just don't, you know, and it's kind of what you said, Mike. It's the flyover states. It's kind of the wild of the Midwest, you know, just willy-nilly, anybody out there can win. And people kind of perceive the Big 12 that way, you know, and that's what it'll be until we start, you know, demanding respect. And you can only demand respect if you go and win football games. That's the only way. It's just like, you know, you talk about anything. It's like, yeah, I can tell you that I'm good, you know, and everybody always says, well, you know, you can show me better than you can tell me. And that's kind of the way this works, man. So we're going to take a quick break here. We'll flip the script, talk a little basketball coming back on the other side. Just take a quick break to hear from our partners at Synergy Financial.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, guys. So Big 12 basketball is really heating up. Look, obviously, I have a Kansas State slant here. Kansas State struggling the last 3 games, not playing good basketball at all. They're going to have to turn it around. To me, they're on the outside looking into the NCAA tournament, but still a ton of basketball to be played. Still a ton left. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I think the games this weekend are going to tell us something. Look, West Virginia hosting BYU. West Virginia coming off a really good game against UCF. Good victory. TCU beating Texas Tech. Texas Tech was at the top of the league, which is weird to say. I mean, when you think about it, but they were at the top of the league with all these good basketball teams out there. But this Saturday, I think, is going to tell us a little bit more. TCU, I'll start with you, Jamie. I know they're playing Texas. Texas, again, is another team that looks like they might be on the outside looking in, even though they've played a little bit better lately. I'm not sure that Texas really is a NCAA caliber team. They have the parts. There's no question. They have the absolute parts to be one of the better teams in the country, actually, but they haven't been able to figure that out and put it together. So big weekend this weekend. Tell us a little bit what you're looking at this weekend with TCU hosting Texas.
Well, I'm having some flashbacks now to the last time we were all together. And, I think, Mike, you and I agreed we could see Texas going 0-4, 0-5 or whatever it was. And they immediately went out and beat Baylor. And so I just think that the chaos of this conference this year is at a different level with how good this conference is top to bottom. Even Kansas State, who's been struggling, can beat anybody. Oklahoma State's shown that they can win games in conference. West Virginia's getting stronger as well with the guys that they've gotten back in the lineup the last couple of weeks. But when this comes to TCU Texas basketball game on Saturday, TCU fans are going to get up for it because it's an in-state game. The team's going to get up for it because it's their last chance at Texas. Yeah. Maybe until you get to the Big 12 tournament this year, and beyond that, who knows? And so you're going to get TCU's best shot this Saturday. It's also should be noted, TCU is retiring Kenrich Williams' number at halftime of this game on Saturday. Okay. Kenrich, lovingly known as Kenny Hustle around the facilities. He's a 6-year NBA player. Now he's on the Thunder, was on that team, those first few teams when Jamie Dixon got into town, won the NIT. He's the leading rebounder in the history of the program. So he's going to be back in town. Kurt Thomas is back in town. Desmond Bain is in town for this game, all to celebrate Kenrich and watch the game against Texas. The Oklahoma City Thunder GM is going to be in town for this game to watch and celebrate with Kenrich as well. So there are going to be some big names and big faces in town for this game. It's already a sellout. The student section has been expanded for this basketball game, and it's a whiteout. So everything that you could possibly stack on top of the game itself has been stacked. And I think the energy in the building is going to be great. But realistically, what TCU needs to do to win this basketball game is continue doing what they've done over the last 3 games, which is protect the basketball. They've minimized turnovers, which really helped them in the wins at Baylor and this past Tuesday against Texas Tech, and just hitting the open shots. I think last time I was on, I talked about how they've been up and down in their half-court offense this year. Well, they've really kind of ironed some things out over the past week and a half. The ball movement is crisp. They're getting really good looks, but there are still stretches of time where creating the shot isn't enough. They're not quite making the shots at the level that they need to. And so on Saturday, when you've got all this energy around the game, all of these extra things pulling at your attention, I think the biggest thing that TCU can do is protect the basketball, make their open shots. And I think things are going to take care of themselves from there because this is a really talented and deep TCU squad that has already shown they're capable of beating anybody.
Yeah.
Is Lee Nayland going to be there? I think you named every TCU player I could think of. Lee Nayland.
I haven't heard if Lee's going to be there or not. I know that there are a couple of Alex Robinson's going to be there. I don't know if Kean Anderson's in town, but pretty much everybody, the very short who's list of TCU basketball in the history of the program is going to show up, I think.
Yeah, that is
Texas looked good, by the way. Like all of a sudden they started playing like to their identity, which is like we have all this talent collectively, individually maybe, and it just seemed like they started buying into 5 or 8 or 9 guys as opposed to 1 or 2. And then the Houston stuff. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to win there this year, but they played pretty well. And even like games they've lost, the other game I think it was BYU. Like that's not an easy game either. So
No.
to get the 2 wins they did, it's
especially
fine.
when the students are wearing horns down on their shirts. How can you focus?
I wonder, like, if this is what the Big 12 is doing now. Like, everybody thinks the Big 12 is protecting Texas. I also wonder if they're saying, you know what? Screw you. We're going to make this as big of a target for you as you go to the SEC as possible, because there's no way the SEC is telling their fans to take their shirts off or not to do that.
Not a chance.
They're putting
Not
a gigantic fluorescent arrow over their head for the horns down for every student section and every SEC venue now, because now it's very clear that you can't do this in Texas. Well, guess what? Every school in the SEC is going to want to do that now. I think it's like 4D. It's chess, not checkers, by Brett Yormark.
I think I don't know if this was strategic on TCU's part, but part of what they're doing for the whiteout on Saturday is they're giving out shirts to the student section that all have Kenrich Williams' face on them. So maybe that was a preemptive way of not having to ask any students to take their shirts off with any kind of negative Texas messaging on it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just wild. I can't understand what we're doing here. I really can't understand what all of this is all about. I mean, it'd be one thing if somebody were throwing stuff on, or it was obscene things on T-shirts, or fans were throwing stuff. But horns down T-shirts, you're gonna make kids. Come on, man. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
I want to point out one more thing about this game, though, before we kind of move on to other things.
Sure.
And that's Jameer Nelson Jr.'s play over the last couple of weeks, and then that of Avery Anderson as well, because I think Jameer has kind of taken the front, kind of taken everybody's attention with the game he had in Waco with 30 points in that triple overtime win. He had a couple really big moments late in this game against Texas Tech. But when he and Avery Anderson got into this program this offseason, they were both really 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio guys. And the goal that Jamie Dixon gave them was to become 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio guys. A casual basketball fan might hear that and say, that's not a big leap. That's a huge leap to make, going from 1-to-1 to 2-to-1. And they've both accomplished that now this season. They're both 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio guys. Neither of them had a turnover in that win against Texas Tech on Tuesday. And they both had, I think, 4 assists in that game. So the play of TCU's guards, specifically Nelson and Anderson, has really propelled this team to the next level. And then Trey Tennyson, 50% three-point shooter. I think TCU, what they've done with 3 first-year in the program guards has been really, really a sight to see.
Some of those are my favorite guys, like favorite stories in the Big 12 this year for a couple of reasons. Like Tennyson, I mean, again, that was a guy Dixon liked, and not many other people did in the Power 5. So that's one. We've been over him a little bit before. Anderson was just one to watch. I saw him go wild against West Virginia a couple of years ago, and I thought, man, this guy might like lead the Big 12 in scoring. But there's been a couple Oklahoma State players, guards, who've transferred. It didn't work out. That they almost hit like a ceiling at Oklahoma State. And those teams have had issues, well documented for sure. And they've gone on and done okay, I guess. Like Isaac Lively didn't do great at Illinois.
I think so.
I can't remember, which is my point. I can't remember. Yeah. And then now you have Anderson, who's really kind of reinvented himself within this season after Oklahoma State. That's cool. And then Nelson, like I think we kind of romanticize these mid-major players, and all of a sudden they're going to make the leap up into a power conference, and it's not easy. It's just difficult. And if you look at him and McCollum in Oklahoma, these are some like prolific scorers in those mid majors who are actually cut in the Big 12. That's not easy, and they're really driving the success of these programs. So to see some of those like individual Cinderellas, not the teams, but the individual like Cinderellas make that move up into the ballroom, so to speak. I like that a lot. It's fun to see, and I think that makes this Big 12. I mean, kind of, it's a lazy comparison. I'm not the first one to make it, but like akin to the SEC in football, where you want to give it a shot. You're a coach, you're a player, you want to give it a shot. And that's certainly, like I cover West Virginia football, they lose players to Power 5 programs because they want to see what it's like in a bigger league or a better team in a bigger league, even though the Big
absolutely
is still a Power 5. Well, now I think if you pitch this right, you could turn over your roster every year. Really, every year you could survive coaching changes, whatever, just by nailing the transfer portal and not having to wait so long. And guys like McCollum and Nelson, and there are others for sure out there that are making this happen.
Yeah.
I think West Virginia is the perfect picture of that this season, losing Coach Huggins and bringing in the number 2 portal class in the country. And yes, it took a little bit for the pieces to fit together for some guys to get healthy, but I think the product that we're going to see over the last month and a half of the season is going to be a testament to exactly what you just said, that the portal can fix a lot of issues in the short term.
Yeah, it's a weird experiment. They certainly don't want all the volatility, I guess we could say. Right? But I mean, if you ranked transfer portal players in June, July, August, like Kurt Kriisa and Jesse Edwards and Raekwon Battle, they're three of your top 25 players for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Edwards, big time. Like that's a pro prospect. That's a big defensive player, a double on when he's healthy. And he comes from Syracuse to West Virginia. Kurt Kriisa led the Pac-12 in assists twice, granted playing with a different caliber athlete and totally different style of basketball. Can he do it in another system, in another conference? So they kind of make this leap up from the ACC, the Pac-12 to the Big 12. And then Battle was just kind of like this guy that was okay, didn't really do much in the Pac-12, flourished in the Big Sky. What can I do back in the Power 5? And, it's been a bit of a struggle for him. I think maybe he's kind of regressed a little bit to maybe the norm. That might oversimplify a little bit, but he's more of a Big Sky player than a Big 12 player right now. But he certainly has talent. I mean, he can get you 25 if you're not careful. It's such a weird chemistry experiment right now that it's going to take time. But you're seeing a program like this that doesn't have the bona fides of a lot of Big 12 or Power 5 programs that was able to nevertheless flash some NIL, Hall of Fame coach at the time, and say, hey, give it a shot here. You're going to be good. We're going to be good.
Yeah, I just like the mix of the conference overall. And especially in basketball, the transfer portal, everybody keeps thinking, well, even if you get a new coach, it takes 3 or 4 years to be good. And I'm like, no, it doesn't take 3 or 4 years. It's not like football where you got to build, you got to recruit, all these guys and develop players. I'm not saying you don't have to develop players in basketball. I said, but if you bring in guys that know how to play, first of all, there's only 5 guys that play at a time. That's where the big difference comes in. If you get 2 good guys, maybe 3, you can turn your program around. I saw it at Kansas State last year. Not that they didn't have more than 2 good guys, but they had 2 really, really good players that came in, and they basically changed the entire fortunes of Kansas State basketball last year. So it can be done. Moving further along in the conference, and looking at, and I don't know if we talked about this the last time you guys were here, is the number of teams that can get in the tournament. I kind of touched on K-State's troubles at the very beginning of the show here, and them being on the outside looking in. Still a ton of basketball left, but they got some problems that I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you guys. It's tough to turn those kinds of things around. Now, they are playing a tough stretch, but the whole Big 12 is a tough stretch. So it's like, what do you do? Where there's no nights off. So, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not sure that you can change not having a real point guard on your team. Teams understanding that now and literally just blitzing you and pressuring you and taking you out of your offense to where you can't score the basketball. That's Kansas State's problem. Moving forward, the number of teams getting in the tournament, I was out there just throwing out numbers. I said 11. And I'm thinking I've got to reel that back in. 11 was wishful thinking, but teams are playing really well. I think I may back it down to 9 as of now. I think 9 is a solid number. People are saying between 9 and 10. I've had people say 7. I'm thinking 7. I go, yeah, that's not being fair here, unless people just fall off the map. What do you guys think?
I think 9 is a nice, fun number to hope for. I think 10 would be a really cool number to get. I think with the way the conference is cannibalizing itself, that's going to be a challenge because the selection committee is going to look at some of these in-conference records and say, 8 and 10, I don't know if that's good enough. Is 7 conference wins good enough to get in from the Big 12 this year? And so that's the question that you have to start asking. Every team in the conference already has at least 2 losses. And so in the back half of the schedule here, are there teams that can really rise to the top, but also are there teams that can just survive and get to 500 in conference play? I think that's going to be the biggest barometer of the total number of teams that get in. Right now, I think you've got a solid 8. I think Houston, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Kansas, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma, BYU, I think are the safe bets right now. I think Texas is maybe on the fringe right now. They got to win a couple more conference games, I think.
Right.
And then after that, I mean, is Kansas State going to limp to the finish line? How is Cincinnati going to finish out? Central Florida, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State are probably on the outside looking in right now. And so the middle of the pack is going to be really important to that final number, seeing how many teams can get to that 8-9 win mark in conference.
So internal monkey wrenches here. Let's go. What if West Virginia wins the Big 12 championship?
Oof.
That takes an at-large bid away from the league, I would think, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How good is this conference if West Virginia wakes up one day and says, we're going to cut down the nets in Kansas City? That would take a bid away, I think, for sure. And maybe two, depending on who they beat along the way. And like West Virginia is treating this like they're a Missouri Valley team. They're not going to make it, but they're going to have to win the conference tournament, right? So they're just like, listen, these next 11 games, just figure out who we are and try to win 4 or 5 in 4 or 5 days in Kansas City and see what we can do. So like if they do it, but also what if it's Texas? What if it's Kansas State? What if it's a team that is fringe or off the bubble? That's going to be interesting. Number 2, the bubble itself. I've just kind of like done like brief cursory stuff on this, but there are like 1 bid leagues that may get multiple bids this year. What's going to happen on the West Coast Conference? Gonzaga doesn't win that, or St. Mary's doesn't win that. Like, what if I'm not sure that that's like a clear cut those 2 teams? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if there's a third team from that league, what about the AAC? If it's Memphis and FAU, and one of them doesn't win it, who else wins it? And there's other leagues at Missouri Valley. Like, is Indiana State going to be an at-large team? If they don't win it, I'm not sure how great that conference is. Can they get 2 in if the favorite doesn't win it? And all of a sudden, like, you're just talking 1 or 2 teams. But if that happens across 3, 4 conferences, and they're taking, let's say there's 3 or 4 conferences take combined 6 bids, that's going to come out of somebody's pocket. And I just think the way the selection committee goes, they're going to look for a reason not to give the Big 12 11 teams, 10 teams, or they're going to look at 9 and go, is that worthy? What are the Sycamores really like versus what's Kansas State really like? And all of a sudden you have like a sleeves up conversation with this and you try to figure it out. And then who knows what happens in those rooms? Is it your last 10 games, your last 12 games? Is it what happens in November? I don't know. They don't really have any of that stuff written down on paper. It kind of depends on who's in the room, what they're thinking or feeling that day. So just the bigger the number seems so hard with like you mentioned, the cannibalization, but also like, I think it's not out of the question that somebody surprises us and wins this tournament. Like if Kansas went home on Friday, and all of a sudden that thing's wide open on Saturday. I mean, who knows? Why couldn't the team that we haven't mentioned yet that could be a bubble team, why couldn't they win it? I don't think that's out of the question here. You don't want to win 5 games in 5 days, but 4 in 4 days, I don't think that's
for sure.
Games.
Yeah, and when a team like BYU gets on a roll shooting the 3, like they're going to beat anybody in the conference. Same thing with Cincinnati, with the big men that they've got in that front court, the way that they can rebound the ball. All it takes is a little bit of momentum. And I mean, obviously, this was a while ago, but I think of the UConn Kemba Walker team that was the 5 seed that had to run the Big East tournament way back in the day just to get in. And, anything can happen. And in this conference, kind of like we've already touched on, anybody can beat anybody on any given day. It makes me as a basketball fan really excited for like the next 4 weeks of college hoops.
Absolutely.
I have no idea how things are going to shake out in this conference. All I know is that in the bracketology that Joe Lunardi did the other day, TCU was a 12 seed play-in, and they're tied for 4th in the conference right now. And so I don't know what's going on from a national perspective with this conference and this brand. But all I know is that it's going to be some really dang good basketball down the stretch here.
Yeah. So I kind of came up in Big East basketball in that tournament at Madison Square Garden where like you would go on a Tuesday night and your friends were like, oh, what are you going to do in New York City? Your team doesn't play till Thursday. I'm like, I'm going to go watch
all the basketball.
Yeah. Like, oh, you love Providence and DePaul? No, but it's going to be good. Right. So like, that's what this is like. Those were rock fights. And then like you would see 6 overtime games and Hall of Fame coaches just trying to milk everything. And it was like fantastic theater. And I'm like a brat about this. I don't want to apply that to anything else. Like that's my memory. Right. I don't want that to happen again because I might not be there. And it might like how special was it if it actually gets replicated in the future? We're probably going to see something very like that again, where from 1 to 14 over those 5 days, you're going to see crazy stuff happen because I just don't think the bottom is that far from the top. I don't think Oklahoma State's near the top, but like middle.
Yep.
Fair. I don't think West Virginia is the least talented team in the conference, and they're going to prove that, I think, before this is over. But like, could that team go 4-0? I mean, yeah, depending on the matchups and how hot they get and who's healthy and who's not, like that team is going to find its stride later in the season. And again, like they're taking this like they're a low major, they're a mid major. Just get to the finish line and see what you can do from there. And I think you're going to have a couple teams that are like that, but also some house money stuff too, where a team that's in, well, why can't you win it? So that it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be like must see TV or must see streaming, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure. Hopefully it's all on TV. And again, 5 days of that too. It's going to be good basketball, I'm sure.
Yeah, it'll be really good basketball. The thing that for me is the selection committee, it seems like over the last 3 to 4 years, have kind of shifted to giving bids to more Power 5 schools.
Yeah.
It's kind of like they've gone away from giving the bids to the mid-major schools because I think, number one, attendance, that people aren't going to the game and people aren't watching. And I think they're like, well, if it comes down to it, because there's been so many years where they would give the bid to the mid-major team. They would reward a mid-major team. Well, they've gotten away from that. And I think maybe the television isn't what they want it to be. The attendance, I know, isn't what they want it to be, because you go to some of those games, I mean, wherever it is, we'll just use Kansas City as an example. You have two teams from the West Coast and the East Coast, and they got 3,000 people there. I'm like, that is not what the selection committee wants. That's not what they want. So they're giving it more to these bigger schools. That's why I think the Big 12 has an opportunity to get more teams in, because if it's a fringe, it's kind of what you said, Mike, Kansas State and Iowa or Indiana State, who would you rather have? Well, they're going to take Kansas State because they know Kansas State's going to bring fans and they're going to show up, where Indiana State, maybe they had a little bit more season, but who did they play? We'll give it to this team because, at the end of the day, the mighty dollar rules everything these days.
To me, that's a little disappointing. I'm going to be completely honest, because
I don't disagree.
I do love the mid-major Cinderella story. I love upsets, and especially in this tournament, I love upsets. I was one of the people laughing the hardest when Virginia went down as the first 1 seed to a 16 seed, because it's just fun. It's
absolutely
fun. It's fun to tell the story. It's fun to learn the story. And, with Indiana State specifically, they were TCU's super regional opponent in the baseball tournament this past spring, and they were supposed to host. They had earned a national seed. They were supposed to host, but that weekend conflicted with the fact that they've hosted the state's Special Olympics for like the last 50 years. And so they knew going into that, if they were going to reach the super regional, they would not be able to host that series. But that was okay with them because they have this tradition of hosting the Special Olympics. I would have never known that story if Indiana hadn't earned a national seed. I would have never heard that story. I would have never made that connection with that university and that state and that legacy. And I think we lose out on stories like that one when we just defer to the bigger program with the larger fan base, because it's gonna play towards our dollar, our bottom line. I get it from a financial perspective, but it is, to me, just a fan of the sport and a fan of those stories that we don't normally hear. It's a little disappointing.
Do y'all remember who was in the Final Four last year?
Florida Atlantic, San Diego State.
Okay,
UConn,
that was two I wasn't sure.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And like, I think a lot of people were like, "Man, FAU, what a great story." San Diego State finally punched its ticket. That's been a high level mid major. UConn, is it a blue blood, blue chip program, all that stuff. But like, I don't think the ratings were terribly redeeming for that, which doesn't really matter to me, but it does matter to people who pay billions of dollars for that tournament. So like, that's an unfortunate metric of it. And I just feel like the football aspect of this is rubbed off on basketball somewhat.
Absolutely.
Where, like, Cincinnati was about as well equipped a group of 5 program to be a Power 5 adversary, and you saw what happened. Like, it just wasn't the same. And I just wonder about like all this resistance to push group of 5 programs out and not let them in because they don't match up. And by and large, like, they typically don't match up well. Like, you've seen group of 5s, like Liberty this year, not a good example, but like that was the best group of 5 program, and what happened? Wasn't very good. And there's a lot of instances like that. And I just wonder how much of like the football thinking, which again is let's curry favor to our biggest and proudest programs, and keep it insulated to like the power groups. I wonder how much of that thinking trickles down to basketball, because I think basketball is a totally different sport where the ceiling is much more breakthroughable. Trying to think of the word here, like a mid-major or like a VCU.
The floor is higher.
Yeah, you can do that. You can break through in basketball because you only got to win 6 games, Yep. Maybe 9 if you have to do a conference tournament. If you're not large, you get in, that's fine. But like, you're playing a season based on, maybe years together. A lot of these mid-majors make their, a 2 or 3 year build to get to that one season, those 2 seasons where it's special, like FAU this year and last year too. And that happens more than in football. Football's totally different, but I think the thinking is unfortunately the same.
And Mike, I think you make a good point there too, because if they're working off of that same thinking, that line of thinking that we see in football, does the Big 12 even really have an advantage when it comes to those fringe tournament teams? Or would we see 10 SEC teams and 7 Big 12 teams get in, because that's happened the last few years, where I think the SEC has actually outbid the Big 12. And I don't think there's anybody in the country who's a reasonable person who would say that the SEC is a better conference top to bottom than the Big 12.
Correct.
But they're getting more bids year over year all of a sudden. And you could make the same argument about the Big 10 and the ACC as well when you start to compare numbers over the last few years of the tournament. All of it kind of plays into the scenario here that we're gonna see play out in the next month and a half.
Yeah, the one thing about it is that, and you both of you are correct. It does feel like the football way of thinking might be slipping into the basketball way of thinking, and it's absolutely ridiculous when you think about that, because basketball is so much about matchups. Football isn't necessarily that. Well, yeah, there's going to be some matchups when you're dealing with close teams. But in basketball, you can have two guys. If you have two guards, one can shoot and one can distribute, you can compete. As long as you got some functional guys that can rebound, you can compete out there. Football is not that way. It's just not, man. You've got to have guys in the trenches that can block, that can get after guys. You got to be able to compete that way. It's a perfect example, Mike, talking about Liberty. If they were the best group of 5, that wasn't very good football that we saw in that Fiesta Bowl. It was terrible. So basketball is totally different. We got to keep it separate. It is separate. That's one of the reasons why I think the Big 12 is going to be, if they can pull off this TV deal for just basketball, if they can pull that off like they've been talking about, it kind of sets them apart from everybody else. Number one, it's going to add a huge financial to every school. But 2, it's going to put them on the national stage, which on the flip side, yeah, we're talking about basketball, but it will help on the football side just because of the national recognition and national brand that you get out there. It can work the opposite way, I believe, for the Big 12. But you know what? Use what you got. If basketball's the best, use that to get you where you're trying to go nationally.
I think about the National Basketball Tournament and what that is. And that's, 16 games on Thursday, 16 games on Friday, right? How many college football playoff games are played at once?
Correct.
So,
hardly any.
How is the thinking for inclusion and catering this to television the same, right?
Yeah.
And the sad part about this is that frequently the best part of these college basketball games in March are the final 8 minutes, the final 4 minutes. You don't have a red zone channel for March Madness, right? You got to multi-screen that thing, which you probably could do. I don't know if YouTube TV is a sponsor here or not, but you can do that, but it's not a thing. But all your eyes are on one screen for football.
That's right.
If one of the basketball games is bad, go to the other one. There's
Correct.
more out there. If one of the football games, and I think that's why football is more consolidated on the best of the best. It's a small piece of the mosaic. I get that, but basketball can be a little bit more widespread. And also, you got 68 teams, and how many of them are at large? I think 36 are at large.
Yep.
So it's a little bit different there, but I just feel like the inevitable is that the football thinking is going to overtake everything else. We're seeing everything split toward football, but we're also seeing that split kind of fracture things and let that thinking seep through. And don't screw with the tournament. It's almost perfect,
mess
right?
with the tournament.
I don't want to
the best thing. To me, it's the best thing going. I'll be honest. I love March Madness more than any postseason tournament out there, even more than the NFL. I just love March Madness more than any postseason tournament. I just do.
It's great. I would also stump as a baseball guy for the way that they format the baseball tournament as well, with a round robin regional tournament at the round of 64 level. I think is really an exciting way to do things. And then the fact that you get to host all the way through essentially the Sweet 16 in college baseball, bringing those games on campus and making those a home atmosphere for some teams. I mean, I had the chance to go to Fayetteville last year for the Arkansas Regional. I watched TCU and Indiana State in 2 games in Fort Worth, and the atmosphere of those games, playoff atmosphere for a baseball game, right, is incredible. And if I had my way, I'd do it similarly for hoops, where instead of you having these regional arenas where it's hard for people to get to, it costs a lot of money, the tickets are expensive, whatever. Let some of these teams host, right? Let Kansas State host a couple games in a row if they advance. I think there may be some solutions to the attendance and the financials.
Well, they do it for women,
right? They do it for the NIT as well.
They sure do.
And so I think that there's some solutions out there to make it more accessible and protect what the NCAA is obviously concerned about, which is the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I appreciate you guys coming on today, man. I thank you enough. We will bring you guys back as many times as you want to come. Like I said, we are just getting started with this thing. I appreciate your all's insight, man. Thank you.
Big 12 baseball next, right?
Let's get it.
All right,
practice started up. Practice started up. I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
All right, guys. We'll hear another word from our Synergy partners, our partners with Synergy Financial. Thank you, guys, man.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, got a lot of stuff that we covered there, Fitz. I mean, college basketball, I love what Jamie said at the end and kind of using the NCAA tournament to be and make it more you went out there. There you are.
My camera just doesn't like me. It just doesn't like me, man. Yeah, that was interesting stuff. Those two are really good together.
Yeah, they are. They are. I definitely like what Jamie said as far as the NCAA tournament. Bringing some of those first round games to campuses. I think it makes sense. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do is the NCAA, get it all but I mean, how many times have we seen the games are in Boise, Idaho, and nobody shows up to the game? They got 3,000 and 4,000 people there or wherever it is. I'm not trying to just bag on Boise, Idaho, wherever the game is, even in Kansas City, when KU plays or K-State plays there, it'll be full. When those two teams are not playing there, there's nobody at the game. I'm like, what are we doing? Let's just make it make sense sometimes. And I just think they get in their own way. But I mean, that's the NCAA for you.
Yeah. You know, what really bothers me is since I went to this pod thing, you know, where you've got two different brackets in the same site in those first rounds to try to get teams regional.
They do.
I don't think it's really worked the way they wanted it to.
Nope.
And here's my out of the box thought. Let's say one of your regionals, your Midwest regionals in Dallas. Well, then your first two sites are, I don't know, Austin and Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
So fans can go to a region and just stay and not have to go, oh, we're in Buffalo this week because we're Syracuse, but next week we're in Sacramento for the regional.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And it'd be so easy to do. If you're in Atlanta, you got all those, you know, Florida sites. And if you're in the the only place you'd probably run into some issues, maybe out west, which is a little more scattered population. But brother, I'm fine with having a Vegas regional every year. And I think fans would be too. And then you've got so many choices around there, Phoenix. And, you know, you could almost run permanent sites. Like you already got that for the first four. They go to this Dayton every time. So why wouldn't you take like LA, Vegas, Phoenix? You guys for the next 3 years are going to rotate. And one will be the regional per year, and then you'll be the sub-regional. You know, just do stuff like that to make it a little bit easier and not reinvent the wheel with all these different sites every year that honestly are poorly run at times because they just don't have that much background in running tournaments. But
well, and another thing is like all the arenas that they have these things in are not always the best arenas. I mean, if we're trying to showcase the NCAA tournament and March Madness, you know, you got to put these things in really good arenas. And again, I'm not trying to bag on a Boise, Idaho or a Buffalo or any place like that. I'm like, but first of all, how many fans are going? That would be number one. And how nice is the arena? I'm like, let's just keep it simple. Let's not be silly about this thing. It's just what you said. Pick three places. I mean, and that's a perfect triangle that you mentioned is Phoenix, Las Vegas, and LA. Rotate it and have everything be right there every single year. You could do that in every region in the country. You're telling me that people won't go to Madison Square Garden to go to a basketball game, the NCAA, like last year, K-State. That was a perfect example. Place was packed. It was electric. But people will go to Madison Square Garden even if they aren't invested in the teams. They are going to go there just so they can say, I saw a basketball game there. Heck, when I went to New York City. I don't like the Knicks. but I went just so I could say that I watched a basketball game there. It's a once in a lifetime thing. So I think that you're 100% onto something, Fitz. People, they just got to start making more sense. I understand they're trying to include the entire country in everything, but does that really make sense? Is that what we're doing? I mean, just make it more feasible.
Yeah. My other big tournament thought is this. I think if you're an automatic qualifier as a champion, even if you're a 16 seed, you shouldn't be playing in Dayton. Now, they might want to play in Dayton because that they can get a win in the NCAA tournament by beating another 16 seed. So I appreciate that.
No.
I think Dayton, or actually, I think all these games should be moved to the sites. I think if you're playing for an 11 or 12 seed, you're one of the last teams into the field as a large team.
You got to play the 1 seed.
You got to play. You got to get in there and play. I don't know.
Yeah. And I always think, because those aren't the teams in the tournament. Those are never, because they're automatic qualifiers. They made it. Right. The last teams in are the 12 and the 11 seeds. Let them duke it out. If you want teams to duke it out, let them duke it out. But don't tell me that the 16 seed, put them in, and that is what it is. Let them play, because now you're not giving them the advantage, or you're really making it a disadvantage. They got to play a game just to technically get in, because, again, I know they play the games in Dayton, but those games, you're not in the tournament. You're just not, because nobody's really watching unless you're invested in that team. You're a fan of that team. People aren't watching, or the crazy gamblers. I go, but that's something different. I mean, they don't even put those games Fitz on your NCAA bracket. Like, you don't have to even choose those games on your NCAA bracket. So, a lot of good stuff, a lot of good things that they can change, man.
I'm not a big fan of having it in Dayton. They do a tremendous job with it, but unless your team is close to Dayton, your campus, you're not going to that game. You're going to save your money if they lose, it just saved you a bunch of money. You made the tournament, but I didn't spend a dime. I just go back to the year when K-State played in Dayton, beat Wake Forest, and then played in Sacramento.
Right.
That game should have been played in Sacramento. The winner was going to be in Sacramento. Play the damn game in Sacramento.
I'm still trying to figure that out, Fitz. And maybe you know why. Have some more insight. I'm still trying to figure out how Dayton, Ohio became the epicenter of all these games. I'm just trying to figure that out.
They embraced it. They own it. They're proud of it. And
they are. They love it there. Don't get me wrong.
That.
I would too if they came there every year. I'm just trying what the NCAA was thinking. It's like, that is not the middle of the country. So everybody can't get that. That is not the middle of the country by a long shot. So what made them think that was easy for everybody to get to? It's not like Dayton has this huge airport and everybody can just gather right to Dayton. Every flight goes into Dayton. No, it doesn't.
No.
So I don't know. Well, good show today, man. I appreciate everybody joining in. Again, the Big 12 Insiders, Tuesday through Friday, 1 p.m. Central Time. Make sure everybody shows up. Again, always comment, like, but more importantly, subscribe at Go PowerCat on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow to do it better.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.